Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to work with a new type of node called an animated sprite. And most importantly, we're going to learn how to instantiate that animated sprite using code. So let's go ahead and jump in. So in order to do that, we're going to need some graphics to build our animated sprite. So I'm going to come over to the browser, and I have already loaded this up, but I'm going to go to piscalapp.com. And this is just a really simple online editor for making animated sprites and pixel art. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Sprite, and it's going to load up the interface. I can zoom in and out of this using the scroll wheel on my mouse. And one thing that I want you to notice is that this palette that I'm seeing in front of me is 32 by 32 pixels. So relatively small, which is good. That's what we want. So what we're going to do is actually create a circle. So I'm going to come over here and click on the circle tool. I am going to come all the way up to the upper left-hand corner, holding down the Shift key so that I lock the aspect ratio. I'm going to click and draw a 32 by 32 pixel circle, just like that. The default color in Piscal is black, which you can see right here, so I have this black outline. Now that I've done that, what I want to do is click on the paint bucket tool, and I am going to change the color of the paint bucket. I'm going to click right here, and I'm actually going to fill this with white paint. So I happen to know the code for white is FFFFF. Make sure that color is selected, and then making sure the paint bucket tool is pressed. I'm going to come over here and boom, fill my circle with white, just like that. Now that I've created this, I'm going to download it. So over here on the right hand side, I'm going to click on Export, and there's a couple of different options here. You can download a GIF or a PNG. I want the PNG, or portable network graphic, and I'm going to click download here. Boom, it downloaded to my computer, and it's just called newpiscal.png. We'll look at that in a minute. Now I'm going to do this whole process one more time just to create a different color. So I'm going to come back over to the color picker, and let's put in FF1234. That should be pure red. I'm going to make sure that's selected, and with the paint bucket tool, I'm just going to change this to red. And I'm going to download this again by clicking download, and boom, that's going to come down. And then finally, let's do it one last time, but this time let's pick kind of a pure yellow, something like that. And with that selected, I'm going to fill it, and then I am going to download the sprite again. Okay, so that's all I needed to do with Piscal. So you could go ahead and close your browser. Now let me come down to my desktop, and you can see here the 3 files I've just downloaded are here. And let's give these some meaningful names. So I'm going to name the first one circle white, and then underscore 32, just so I remember that it's 32 by 32 pixels. And I'll call this one circle red underscore 32, and I'm going to call this one circle yellow underscore 32. Excellent. Now that I have these on my desktop, I'm just going to leave them there, and I'm going to come over to my Godot project. This is exactly where we left off from the last tutorial. Now, the easiest way that I found to quickly import resources to the file system is to just drag and drop. So I'm going to come back over to my desktop. I'm going to select all 3 of these circle PNG files, and I'm going to drag and drop them in here. And you can see 1, 2, 3, Godot nicely imports those. Now watch what I'm going to do. I am actually going to close the main scene. I'm going to select main. I'm going to come up to the scene folder, and I'm going to close the scene because I actually want to create a new scene so that I can use these 3 image files that we just imported. So I'm going to create a new scene, and I'm going to need a root node for that. And for this particular project, I want to get an animated sprite, which is a type of Node 2D. animated sprite. I'm going to click create. And here it is up here. And now what I want to do is actually add those 3 images as frames for the animated sprite. So I'm going to come over here to the inspector panel. The very first property that's available is frames, and right now it's empty by default. So I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to say new sprite frames. So I'm going to click that. It populates it with sprite frame. I can click on that and notice that I get the sprite frames inspector becomes available. And what I can do now is simply drag and drop my 3 images into the animation frame. So I have one positioned at 0, one positioned at 1, and one positioned at frame number 2. And I could move these around if I wanted to. I could change their position. It doesn't really matter. I think what I'll do just for fun is to put the white one first, the red one second, and then yellow down. And I can save. Godot wants to know, this is a scene that you just created. What do you want to call it? And by default, it's calling it animated sprite scene, because our root node of this scene is animated sprite. So let's go ahead and keep that default name, and I am going to click save. And now I'm going to close this scene, close scene, and I am going to open up there's a couple of ways I can do this. I can come open recent, and I want to come back to my main scene. So now what we want to do is use code to add animated sprite scenes onto our project. So let's click on our code. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of this text here. As soon as my game starts up, I want to add a copy or create an instance of animated sprite. So how do I do that? Well, the first thing I need to do is use the keyword var for variable. And I am going to call this, I'm going to give this variable a name, circle1. And I'm going to say, I want circle1 to be equal to something that I'm going to load. And I need to tell Godot what to load. And you've probably guessed what it is. I'm going to go to my resource folder, and you can see here with the code hinting, Godot is saying, these are all of the things in the resource folder. Which one do you want to load? And I want to load the animated sprite scene. Then what I have to do is tell Godot that I want to create an instance of it. So I'm saying load that resource and create a new instance of it. And I want you to store it in this variable called circle1. I want to give this circle a name. So I am going to say circle1.name. I can set the name property, and I'm literally going to call it circle1. Just like that. And I want circle1 to be playing. Because it's an animated sprite, I'm going to say playing equals true. I want those 3 frames to play. I want to make sure that this circle that I'm creating is visible. So I have to add it as a child to the scene tree. So I'm going to say add child, add underscore child, and notice how that turns blue. That means it's a built-in function that comes with Godot. And I am going to say, Godot, I want you to add the child named circle1. So I'm going to save this code, and then I'm going to run it. And take a look what happens. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, at position 0, 0, I can see my animated sprite blinking. Excellent. Now, let's move it to a better location. I don't like the fact that it's showing up at position 0, 0. I can manipulate the properties of circle1. So before I add it to the stage, I'm going to say circle1.position.x. I'm going to set the x value to be 512, the middle of my screen. And I'm also going to manipulate the y value, and I want it to be below my header, which I know is 100 pixels. So I'm just going to put it at about 200. Let's just try that. And I'm going to save and run my code, and there you go. I've instantiated a copy of the animated sprite scene, and I've added it as a child to the scene tree. And there it is. Excellent. Now, what I'm going to do is copy all of this text, and I'm going to come down, and what I'm going to do is create another copy, another instance of animated sprite. But I can't call it the same thing. So I'm just going to use a different variable name called circle2. But if I run this code, the second animated sprite will be right on top of the first one. So I need to move it down a little bit. So I'm going to move it down to position 300. And I don't want this one to play. So I'm going to say playing equals false. And watch what happens. I save my code and run. And now I have two animated sprites that I've instantiated. I've positioned them at different spots, but one is playing as an animated sprite. The other one is frozen at its first frame. And it's frozen because I said circle2 playing equals false. Let's add one more. And you guessed it, we're going to call this one circle3. Everything's the same. Whoops, I just realized this should be called circle3. And this should be called circle2. Now, I don't want circle3 to be playing, but I don't want it to be on frame 0. Instead, what I want to do is set frame equal to 1 instead of frame 0. Remember, frame 0, if I come back over to my animated sprite scene, frame 0 is the white. I want it to be on frame 1, which is the red frame. And notice the numbering here, 0, 1, 2. So if I set it to be frame 1, it should be a red circle. Let's see what happens. Oh, I should change the Y value. Save and run. And let's see, something wacky happened. Oh, I see the error right here. I need to add child circle 3, not circle 2. And excellent. And let's go ahead and add a fourth circle now, which will be frame 2. So I can't reuse this name. I need to use a different one. So I'm going to call it circle 4. And I'm going to set this to be frame 2. And I'm just going to go a little bit lower down to 500. And let's see what happens. Something weird. Again, I forgot to change the value. Let's see what happens. And excellent. We now have 4 animated sprites that we have instantiated and added to the scene tree. And we did all of that using code. Importantly, the first instance of our animated sprite is playing all 3 frames over and over again. The other 3 are not playing. In other words, the animation is stopped, but we've set it to different frames. Frame 0, frame 1, frame 2.